Well, since May of this year, I joined American Family Insurance at their national headquarters here in Madison. I serve with their Protective Services Division as a Director of Strategy and Support. So I oversee the budget and projects and programs for safety and security related programs within our division. Prior to joining American Family Insurance and their enterprise this past May, I served 41 years in law enforcement, the majority of those with the Dane County Sheriff's Office in Madison. The last 14 and a half years as Dane County Sheriff, the 52nd Sheriff of Dane County, dating back to 1839 when the county was created. It was truly an honor and privilege to have been elected in my first race in 2006 to continue serving the citizens of this great county. Well, having spent 41 years in the public sector, particularly in law enforcement, which actually wasn't my first chosen career. I actually began my career after beginning nursing school and having been encouraged to think about a career in law enforcement by the City of Middleton Police Chief prior to joining law enforcement. But the real similarities between my role for 41 years in law enforcement and my current role in the private sector is serving others. For 41 years, I served the citizens of Dane County by being available and by being responsive to their public safety needs. And today, as a director at American Family Insurance and their Protective Services Division, I continue to serve in a company that believes in giving back to its community. In many ways, I believe that both, whether it was the public sector or private sector, is filled with people who are called to serve others before themselves. And in my role now at American Family, it's to serve the employees and customers of American Family Insurance. Well, if I go back to high school, mid-1970s, so 1976, when the Sheriff's Office ran the emergency medical services in Dane County, they ran station wagons, and those were the ambulances of the day. In 1976, in the city of Middleton, the mayor at the time, Judy Karofsky, and her husband, a pediatrician, came up with the idea of moving toward a volunteer ambulance service with a van-style ambulance staffed by volunteers. And in 1976, I was a junior in high school, and I saw the ad in the paper and applied. And prior to turning 18, all I could do was do volunteer work within the station. But once I turned 18, I went to school at St. Mary's Hospital and became certified as an emergency medical technician, and spent 15 years riding the ambulance in the city of Middleton. And it was through that experience that I looked at what I wanted to do with my career. I knew that I wanted to serve my community. And so I began looking at a career in nursing, where I knew that critical care nursing had a shortage, as they do today, of qualified and dedicated nursing staff. So I graduated from high school with a plan to enter nursing school, and at the same time was dispatching for the Middleton Police Department. And it was through that relationship and Chief Dave Steingraber where he began encouraging me to think about a career in law enforcement. I had really never thought about it prior to that. And after some time of encouraging me to think about a career in law enforcement, I applied at the state application level, and I was actually hired by the city of Cross Plains Police Department, or village of Cross Plains Police Department, which has a story all by itself. At the time, I was only 19 years old. I'd gone to an interview with the chief in Cross Plains. He offered me the job. I accepted it, but there was a dilemma. You were required to carry a firearm, and I didn't have one. And so I wasn't old enough yet to even purchase a firearm. You have to be 21 in the state of Wisconsin. So I actually had to go home over dinner to have a conversation with my mother to go to the gun store to buy a handgun so that I could borrow it to go to work. And I spent 9 months with the Cross Plains Police Department before I was recruited to join the Dane County Sheriff's Office, where I spent 41 years. I wanted to be a emergency room critical care nurse, maybe with a future toward med flight or some sort of aviation related critical care, medical care. But I've loved every day of going to work as a law enforcement officer, even in these last couple of years in, tumultuous times in our community. I never looked at those times as challenges. I looked at them as opportunities to reestablish relationships with communities that we predominantly underrepresented communities who we obviously had not done a good enough job as a profession to work with and to work collaboratively to address issues in those communities. And so, as I left the sheriff's office in May, I really left at the highest point of my 41-year career, having spent predominantly the majority of my time during those 14 and a half years working with communities, working with underrepresented communities predominantly to build trusting relationships with our law enforcement partners, not only in this county, but across the state of Wisconsin and across this nation. Well, there are a number of challenges that are addressed by law enforcement across this nation, and those are no different than those challenges here in Dane County. A lot of them are outside of the control of law enforcement, but because we are a 24-hour, 365 emergency response profession, we are often called to address those issues. And the largest percentage of those challenges are the issues surrounding drug and alcohol addiction and mental health. At 2 o'clock in the morning, when an individual a 911 call comes to the 911 center because of somebody who is oftentimes incapacitated or suffering from a drug overdose or their addiction, or who are in mental health crisis, it's law enforcement who are the first responders to address those issues. And the biggest challenge that we have as a society is how we address those issues, and they should not be addressed from a criminal justice perspective. Criminal justice will always have an element of punishment connected to its responsibilities. The fact that people's liberties are denied, that individuals are incarcerated, are left and should be only left to addressing criminal behaviors, not diseases such as alcoholism, drug addiction, and mental health, because it's not a crime to suffer from addiction. It's not a crime to suffer from mental illness, but as a society, because of other failures in addressing our true priorities to treat our neighbors as we would want to be treated, we thrust those challenges on the shoulders of law enforcement. And until we as a society decide that we want to truly address these issues as human needs and not criminal behaviors, will we begin to address them. It's not only law enforcement, it's each of us have a responsibility that when we see somebody in need, whether it's alcohol or drug addiction or mental health or homelessness or lack of education, we all have a responsibility in a democratic society to help our neighbors, because we never know that only by the grace of God go we, that any one of us could be in those situations. And one thing that I've learned, having worked for the sheriff's office, which is statutorily responsible for maintaining a safe and secure jail, is that those who are incarcerated in jail, the vast majority suffer from drug and alcohol addiction. Matter of fact, 80% in the Dane County Jail suffer from drug and alcohol addiction, and roughly 40 to 45% suffer from some level of mental illness. There's this perception in society that those who are incarcerated in jail are dangerous, when in fact, it's truly only a small percentage, less than 5%, who come into our jail on a yearly basis, roughly 16,000 bookings a year, that are truly the predators that the criminal justice system is really designed to address. And we need to think back how we can be smarter on crime, not just more severe in punishment, particularly as we look at crimes such as drunk driving. Not that drunk driving isn't a serious crime, it is. There are hundreds of thousands of people killed every year by drunk drivers. But we need to look at what the underlying cause of that addiction is. And oftentimes, drunk driving is an addiction issue, particularly when you look at third, fourth, fifth, 16th offense drunk driving. That person is suffering from alcohol addiction. They're not getting up in the morning with a intent to commit a felony crime. They're getting up probably drunk in the first place, certainly above the legal limit to drive, and trying to survive. And if we as a society begin looking at these offenses from a human element, we'll begin to solve those problems and come up with better solutions than just incarcerating people. You know, the relationships that I've made over the years with community leaders and community members, the ability to make a difference in someone's life, oftentimes with just small things. You know, helping a single parent take care of a child so that they can get their life on balance, or to have just a free moment to stabilize their mind, to reach out to a family in crisis who may be suffering, and to offer a human touch is probably the most reward that I've received in my 41-year career. It's a career filled with more tragedy than positive fulfillment. Unfortunately, nobody calls law enforcement via 911 because they're having a great day. We only come into people's lives because of crisis. And it's by taking a deep breath and seeing the core reasons that these crises are occurring that we can help members in our community to treat them humanely and as under the golden rule, how we'd want to be treated, and to try to serve others before oneself, which is truly the mantra of public servants, whether it be law enforcement, firefighters, or paramedics, nurses, teachers. It's a calling of sacrifice. It's a sacrifice that we enter our professions knowing and willingly, and that in itself is a reward. Well, there are a lot of those. You know, being responsive to the needs of victims of crime. I spent almost 12 years working on domestic violence task force, and to particularly, you know, today, October is Domestic Awareness Month, to think about the lives that were saved because of the intervention of law enforcement or domestic violence advocates, a safe shelter for a victim, the counseling and programs that are available to families. I think about the many families that I interacted with over those 12 years as a domestic violence detective. I think about a family from Mexico who sent their young daughter to Lodi to experience America, fearful of what their perceptions of America were, and to have those and have her life come to an end brutally as a result of a homicide, and to meet with those parents, to provide them the support they needed, even in light of the fact that they feared coming to America to claim their daughter's body. Today, that relationship still continues with that family. That was a highlight, brought together through a severe tragedy. But today, in light of that tragedy, doors and eyes were open to each other. And that was a highlight of my career, although it started with a very tragic situation. And there are many more. I just feel very fortunate to have been called into this profession to serve, and to have been able to have an impact, a positive impact on what I hope were so many lives. Well, first of all, a willingness to serve others before yourself. You know, it's not a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 job. It's 365, 24 hours. Even though you may work an 8 or 12-hour shift, you're on duty all the time, because the nature of this profession, even when you're not on duty, you don't have the right not to step into a critical situation and be of service. And so a willingness to serve others, a willingness to sacrifice, a deep level of compassion, to understand that, you know, as I talked about the level of addiction and mental health that law enforcement deals with every day, you have to have a level of compassion for individuals suffering, to be willing to your family's willingness to sacrifice. You know, every time I swore in a new class of deputy sheriff, I always spent time talking to the families that their sacrifice goes noticed by all of us as well, because those of us that sign up to be law enforcement officers know what we're getting into. The sacrifice truly is in the lives of our families. I can't tell you how many times Christmas in my family didn't fall on Christmas. Thanksgiving didn't fall on Thanksgiving, and birthdays didn't fall on birthdays. And my anniversary rarely fell on our anniversary, just by the nature of the schedule and sacrifice that the job called for. So it takes a great deal of willingness to sacrifice to be successful in this profession. And I always ask our new recruits, are they willing to make that sacrifice? Because it's not a job, it is a calling to serve. Anybody can go out and get a job. There are a lot of careers out there that don't require the level of sacrifice of a public service employee. But if you're willing to and are feel called to serve in law enforcement, fire service, or the medical services, or as a teacher, there's no more rewarding profession than those. Well, you know, it starts with living a life of commitment and service, even at a young age. I grew up in a family that instilled in me a responsibility to give back to a community, not just enjoy the benefits of the community that I lived in, but that I had a responsibility to give back to that community. And that played into the commitment to serve. You know, it's hard. It's a hard process to get into this profession, and it should be, because of the responsibilities, the privileges that are given to the men and women who go into law enforcement. Not everybody can do this job. Not everybody's cut out to do this job, and that's a good thing. Because as we see the problems that have unfurled across our nation in unethical behavior, these were people who did not make a commitment to rise above um, the challenges, who gave in to opportunity, the wrong opportunity. And those are the people who damage this profession and damage the relationships that so many of us work years to build. It takes years to build relationships and challenge communities, and it only takes a split second to destroy it. Well, before I left in May, I was involved in a number of criminal justice reform programs at the state level and at the national level. My hope is that we will continue as a profession to recognize that there are reforms needed in our profession. There is a commitment by every one of us who wears a uniform to hold each other accountable to our behaviors, to our beliefs. There's a responsibility to know others. We cannot just go on living our professional lives based upon the lives that we ourselves experienced. We must learn among each other of other cultures, experiences, to be successful. And we need to begin rebuilding relationships. We can't rest on our laurels. It's not the community's responsibility to build relationships with us in this profession. It is our profession's responsibility to reach out and build trusting relationships with the communities that we serve. We serve at the pleasure of the community. The priorities of our community are the priorities that we carry out. And we need to keep that in perspective. Well, as I mentioned, I was very honored to have served our community for 41 years, and it will always be a highlight of my life. But as I transition into the public sector, I continue to serve many of those communities in my capacity with American Family Insurance. I'm blessed to have served as many years as I did, and to be able to transition into an enterprise that also believes in a commitment to our community, a commitment to our employees, and I'm in a perfect role to be able to continue to do that based upon my experience over the past 41 years.